Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 34 of A Letter to the King. For those of you new to the series, A Letter to the King is my attempt to explain the various levels of biffo, hostility and port battles taking place on Euro PvP 1. Let's have a look at where we were last week. Now, before I do, some folks pointed out I was a little bit salty in last week's Letter to the King. And I think that's true, I was, and it's because I felt a little bit salty. The whole week was a bit salty. And speaking to a lot of regular players, I was getting a little bit miffed off with the state of affairs. However, hands up, I did kind of make two mistakes. Firstly, I sort of forgot we're in test a little bit. I got a little bit wrapped up in losing and winning. And the mechanics of losing and winning, and so I forgot that, so I have kind of done a bit of a mental reset and I'm back into happy rainbow dolphin fun world. And the other mistake I made, which I think is a bit of a sort of, for a footballing analogy, I sort of played the man, not the ball. So, you know, when nation X does sort of dodgy thing Y, it's really dodgy thing why I should be attacking and not too much nation X. To some extent, the things we're seeing now, some of the things that are going on now, some of the failings in the mechanics, I'd rather we hate them in beta and they don't exist in the production build, in the go live build. So I've taken it upon myself, and I hope we all do, to make sure I hit the F11 key more often when something isn't working, or when something's too silly. If I'm a pirate trying to knock off a little cutter and I drag in half of the Pacific Ocean and get obliterated by towers off the coast of blah blah, then stick in an F11 and sort of ask, is this really what's meant to be happening? Or post in the suggestions something better on the forums or whatever. Anyways, let's have a look at last week. Where are we? What's going on? Where are the pressure points? So last week the Danes managed to grab up one of the two very precious live oak ports off the United States. Pressure was building down here in the south, around the Antilles. The Dutch were still trying to expand their borders, and the Brits and the Spanish were coming to blows a little bit around here. There was a tremendous amount of piracy, not just by the pirates, just general people killing each other in this neck of the woods because of the precious resources. And we were all in a little bit of shock learning that the shipbuilding mechanics are going to change again. At the same time, we kind of all asked for the shipbuilding mechanics to be changed. And that's kind of what we have to remember. Most of what's been fiddled with is very much based on things we've said, I wish they'd fiddle with this. So we kind of have to... we have to just let the devs work at a different pace than us. We play it every day. Many of us play it too long every day. And the devs work at a sort of monthly, 6-weekly release, although they are, in theory, closing in on production, and they're only meant to be 5 or 6 releases away from production. Certainly doesn't feel like that, but anyhows, let's have a look at the biff and the bash. So, as far as the alliances go, hopefully we're in the last little wobbles as we move into the 3-week alliance spans. The Americans fell out of the British-Dutch alliance, and the Swedes fell out of the Dane, French and Spanish alliance, and the pirates still have fallen out with everybody, and the egalitarian system just kill everybody randomly. Really the only people the pirates seem to have some level of affinity and relationship to is the Spanish. They probably tend to work together with the Spanish more than with any other nation, although they do remind us that they are for hire. So what happened biffo-wise? Well, the Spanish ports in this little county down here is called Trinidad, around El Loco and the likes, and Guacamole down in the south. Now, oddly enough, and so this is a game mechanic thing, and it's something I posted on the forums, the Swedes fell out of the alliance, but they were still able to generate hostility. And this was kind of really good for them because nobody other than the Spanish could put that hostility down, and the Spanish still liked the Swedes. So they didn't try and put it down. So this is a piece of gameplay the devs really need to fix, because fundamentally you deliberately fall out of an alliance with a friendly, and you can eat some of their ports as part of a deal, and no one can stop you unless they can beat you to the top of the hostility-ometer. And of course your friends, in this case the Spanish, can attack them and overly reduce your hostility. So the Swedes took advantage of this and did some testing, let's say, and so they managed to get an unopposed port and pick up Trinidad, which has increased their footprint now down here in the south of the Antilles, and puts pressure onto the eastern flank of the Dutch, as they're really struggling to break out from this area along the Nicaraguan and Venezuelan coast. Meanwhile, the Danes, bless their socks that are made of cotton. A couple of weeks ago, they discovered the bug that not the bug, but the sort of the wonky mechanic that you could flip a port from 0 to 100% hostility by delivering 134 war supplies. So the devs have responded by saying they don't really like that. They're going to fix that in the next patch. And in the meantime, they massively increased the weight of war supplies. So they weigh, I think it's something like 900 units each. So you can fit 5 or 6 if you're perked out into a Indiaman. So to deliver 134, quick bit of maths, means you basically need 22 Indiamen to deliver. And the Danes proved that that's still a problem. You used to need 11 Indiamen, now you need 22, and they flipped Bermuda. Now, let us not understate the effort to make 134 war supplies. They are a pain in the arse to make. 4 components, and then each of those components require bits or sub-bits, and each of those require resources. So it's thousands of hours and millions of gold to make those war supplies, and they flip Bermuda again. And of course, Bermuda is has its own special wood type, and it has a speed bonus for holding Bermuda. So there's 3 reasons really to try and keep Bermuda: the rarity of the wood, the speed bonus, and the fact that once taken, it's probably the most difficult port in the game to capture, because to get your ships up here is a 2.5 to 3 hour sail, depending on the class of ship. And of course, if you die, you spawn back 1 billion miles away. And even if you win, you suffer crew attrition and damage. So you better come with a bag full of med kits and a bag full of repair kits, because you can't dock up at these ports. So that's all kind of interesting. So the Danes flipped it. And then in what was probably the most sterling bit of player content of the week, a couple of things happened. So first of all, the Brits, who were moaning again about the port being flipped, and it's just the life, boys. We've got 2 more weeks of hostility bombing at least. What the Brits did is they camped the port entrances for as long as they could for 2 days before the battle. So it was shared amongst the clans, and there was basically shifts of 4 or 5 players sitting at staggered areas around the capital. About 10 or 11 Danes managed to get in and log out underneath the crosshairs of the port, but others were caught on their way in. One particular player managed to lose a Lothian, and then a Santi or a Vic, I can't remember what he lost the second time. And both times they were captured, and a couple more were intercepted as they came in. And then on the day of the battle, it were a sight to behold. So I woke up, much to Mrs. J's delight, at 5 a.m. And the first thing I noted was there was a 50-ship screening fleet all around the island. There was a whole wad of Americans, Brits, and Dutch who'd all made this 2.5 hour, 3 hour sail from the various parts. And I have to say, even the Spanish turned up. I haven't shown them on here. I was going to animate them as coming in late. The Spanish turned up. Unfortunately, they turned up 20 minutes after the port battle began. And look, you laugh at that because it's funny because they're your enemy. But it is a bloody long sail, no matter where you come from, and you have the wind against you 3 or 4 times. And basically, if you get it 4 times, it takes an extra half an hour. And I think that might have been what caught the Spanish out. Either that, or they just guessed it wrong, or someone was late with their alarm clock or whatever. So the Spanish did arrive, but by the time they arrived, it was pretty much all over Red Rover. The Americans, Dutch and Brits, 50 ships, and that's an amazing bit of player commitment, all sailing around the island. Huge battles with the Danes and eventually the Spanish, and there was even some French first rates up here. However, the port battle, and I have a video in my playlist of the port battle, and in my liked playlist there's a video of the screening fleet provided by one of our American allies. And I have to say the screening fleet was great fun. These guys got into 3, 4, 5 battles. And you very rarely controlled because it's such a compact area, and the tagging circles so enormous. Some of these battles were not the ones you planned. In the battle itself, however, the Danes got from memory 14 first rates and a mortar brig in more or less in the first 5 minutes. The Brits, who'd had a fantastic plan on how to defend the port, completely changed their mind and realised there was only 14 of them and kind of went after them. It was a pretty good battle, but because the Danes didn't get their full 25 in until about 25-30 minutes after the whistle had blown, and the last couple of ships who came in were definitely not the ones. They had a couple of Bucentaires and I think even a surprise in there from memory. They were heavily outgunned anyway, plus you're attacking, so you have to be more aggressive. You can't sit back, and when you're outgunned it's very difficult to be aggressive. Plus, you got the towers shooting at you. The Danes like to bring a mortar brig in. The Brits brought in a Connie to chase the mortar brig, and that was kind of like a Benny Hill scene as the two of them chased each other around the map while all the big boys tried to destroy them as they sailed past. But in the end, the Danes were done for. Pretty much half their fleet was either captured or sunk, and then a few more of them outside. So it was a bit of a top defence, and it was a defence that was won by the screening fleet more than by the in-port fleet. And this is really the point I'm trying to draw out here. That content to bring what was probably 100 players on top of the 50 players that eventually fought the port battle, as lopsided as it was, that for me is great content. I mean, the fact it's 2.5 friggin' hours away is annoying. But that's why I prefer the notion of screening and the tactics that go in with it. And I'll tell you a story a bit later about another screening action where the content, although there was a broken mechanic, is fantastic. Onwards and downwards. So the Danes were defeated. The Spanish then had a defence of Pampatar. I've put my finger in the wrong place. Pampatar's over here. I blame the staff. They shall be whipped. The Spanish then had a defence of Pampatar against the Dutch. The Dutch somewhat underestimated the Spanish resolve to hold this and the screening fleets, and to be honest, the port battle itself was a non-starter. And I think it was 25 versus 2 or something silly. It might have been 5. But there simply wasn't enough of an attacking force that made it in on time for the battle to be a battle. And so Spain still hold Pampatar. And there's the Dutch turning on. We won't let you pass. And the Dutch ran away. So there we go. So that was it. That was pretty much it for port battling. So there was, the Swedes down here on a dodgy. There was the Danes up here on a hostility bomb and some amazing screening action. Probably the one genuine hostility generation was Pampatar, where hostility was actually generated by hard-working fleeting failed because they couldn't get past the screening fleet, and that was it. So, however, there's been a few more set up. The pirates are set up to come across the north of Haiti here. I can never remember the region's La Viga or something like that. The vegans. So the pirates got in here. The Dutch used a hostility bomb to set up Cartagena. So Cartagena has got great memories for me. This is the one where the Spanish made such a fantastic stand at the end of the last war, where I think they held it 5 nights running or 6 nights running, and had 2 or 3 nights where they barely lost a ship. There was stupendous screening actions outside the front. So I think Cartagena is sort of more important than it is important. It's a token port, so that'll be happening this week. We know that one's already set up. This is a walk-in. Basically, the pirates can cap anybody they want, and the Spanish have been very selective over what they do and don't defend. They're beginning to turn up in some good numbers, mind you, the Spanish. There was some huge PvP around Bensalem this week. The Spanish had big fleets out around Belize. Which brings me to another gameplay thing, by the way, lovely dev people. You've changed the rules on how long AI fleets stay open. You didn't publish anything. So it used to be 30 minutes. So we had scouts all over the place, and we spotted this big, lovely Spanish 5 first rates and half a dozen second rates go into a fleet. We had a anti-hostility fleet sailing in the area. It was only 10 minutes away. We got there and the sodding thing had closed. Nothing in the patch notes. That would have been a brilliant bit of PvP. That would have been 12 or 14 second and third rates and fourth rates versus 10, 5 firsts and 5 seconds. And you denied it to us because you nobbled the bloody rules of engagement again without telling us. Now, I understand why. Perhaps it's because some of the PvEers are having their PvE mission interrupted. But again, this is where you've got a balance, and I'm okay with you fixing stuff. In fact, please, for the love of God, fix it. But tell us, oh, guys, we've screwed up here. Look, this is our principle. This is what we want to achieve. Everybody goes, yeah, that's great. We want that type of thing. And sorry for the fuck up, and it'll be fixed soon. Don't you worry. But instead, quite often, if you say, hey, our missions are fucked again, you just get a whole bunch of poop dropped on your head. So, come on, devs, help us be positive by giving us a bit of a clue. Anyway, the Dutch dropped a hostility bomb on Cartagena. That should be a fantastic battle. The Brits are close enough to help there. The Danes have turned up before, so the Danish renter fleet pretty much defended this the last time. I think there was one Spaniard in there. He was allegedly lost. Or was that I may be getting that muddled up with another one. But anyway, there'll be Danes and Swedes and French screening here. So this will be a glorious 100-man screening biffo. And then let's hope enough people can get in to give us a contested port battle. And they're always hard. It's always hard. I mean, even if there was no screening fleets and everyone was just allowed to pop into battle, at the moment, as the defender, 7 times out of 10 you should win, because that's the mechanics. You just kite for 30 minutes, let the towers do the do, and then you engage and your opponent doesn't have the time to get the BR down. That is kind of the obvious meta, and it's up to the attacker to break that. Now, here's a good one. The French, those pesky Frenchies, sailed out of St. Louis with an enormous fleet of Indiamanmans. And a whole bunch of Danes protecting them now. A young British captain caught sight of this fleet right at the end of his view distance. He called out for help. The Brits have known that the French have desires on the Windward Islands, Bridgetown, Kingstown and the likes. And so they've kind of got ships stationed ready to repel borders. And they sent out a large fleet, and it took a while to get together, but basically they managed to get effectively 3 waves of ships to go after these Indiamans. And bottoms befell the fleet because of the smuggler mechanic. So this is not me complaining about the French. Well done, Frenchies, for doing your hostility bomb. Well done, Danes, for providing them with a fleet escort. But the British would tag the Danes, and with all the French Indiamans inside the circle. But because they had a smuggler flag, they didn't get pulled in. The British couldn't get close enough to pull in the smugglers because the Danes would counter-tag them. So 3 waves of ships were sent, and at no point were the smugglers drawn in. And then the French 3 waves was about all the Brits could muster in the sort of 15 minutes of scramble they had. All of those ships were engaged in good biffo, but not an Indiaman was picked up because you can't tag a smuggler along with the rest of the fleet. Now, you can individually tag a smuggler and bring that individual smuggler in, but to do that, the escorting ships have to be stupid enough to let you tag them, and the Danes aren't. So, well done, French, you've got your port battle. This one will be hotly contested and screened as well. So next week, we know for a fact now we've got 2 excellent port battles that will be contested. We've got the Dutch coming in here against the Spanish, and we know both sets of allies will turn up for that one. And we've got the French. There is a few folks wondering if it will be the Danes, but we've got the French who will be coming in here to have another go at the Windward Isles and evict the Brits from this threatening position, and I understand why they'd want the Brits out of there. So that's 2 very good port battles coming up next week. The pirates are going to do a walk-in. Where else? Look, there'll always be biffo up and down this coast as long as Live Oak makes sexy time ships. This whole area here, while the Dutch are trying to grow out, is going to be an area of pressure next week. And the Brits and the Spanish will carry on blooding each other's noses around here. And there's an opportunity for some big fleet action. There was almost a fantastic fight at Bensalem, and the Spanish were building a counter fleet. The British were threatening one of their fleets that was locked in combat and were camping it. And that was a big sort of first-rate fleet. And the Spanish, who got some impressive numbers, were forming a fleet at Bensalem. But they made that mistake where they kept coming out and going back in and coming out and going back in. And twice the Brits managed to tag them, and twice they ate a third of their fleet. So they lost about, well, they probably had 15 ships sunk, but they probably handed over 6 or 7 ships, second rates, to Brit cappers. And this is one of the funky things at the moment. There's very little what I would call clean open world fighting at the moment. And this is something the boys, that the devs need to work on. So lastly, we come to the Tally of Splinters, Sail and Blood. And as you can see, what a week it's not been. Basically, the Swedes took 4 ports off the Spanish in an area that no one could stop the Swedes from doing that, and an area the Spanish don't care about. So next week, if it's like this again, I will be doing a tweet to the king. Now, one last bit of business. The symbol I've been using to represent the United States of America is no longer funny. So I was goading my the Septics, the Yanks, the Americans with my little Donald Trump image here, because that was very funny. Now it isn't. So I need a new symbol for the US. So you need to think of something. You know, we've got clogs for the Dutch and croissants for the French and a matador for the Spanish and Scoobies for the Danes and a Volvo for the Swedes. So they're all sort of, you know, national stereotypically recognisable symbols. So for the Americans, I don't know, the McDonald's arches, a burger, Mickey Mouse, Goofy, Homer Simpson, a bald eagle, a can of Coke. Who knows? But it won't be Donald Trump. So some suggestions in the comments would be good, please, chaps. Because we need to say cheerio. Because we can't be using presidents and prime ministers as each other's symbols in the letter to the king. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope I was less salty, Let's help the devs get this next patch so it's a step forward, and maybe 2 or 3 patches from now we'll really be tightening the screws up. In a couple of weeks we're going to have raids, which could be very excitement. I hope so, because in the off-peak period it's dead as a bloody doornail right now. Just trading and a little bit of biffing every hit, but nothing. There's no real substantial off-peak action right now. So let's hope the next patch brings us something there, some balance. And of course we get the land in port battles, which I'm super excited to wake up at 5 a.m. to experience. So that's it for this week's Letter to the King. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.